Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's dualta, and in this podcast series, I will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment company. So fresh off the successful trip we had to New York, which the content will be coming out this week coming. We had our Brighton event and all that stuff is getting prepared at the moment. I've just hired another assistant to help me with the marketing so I can take that off Charlotte's plate and point her at the next thing in our business that needs fixed. So delighted to have my wife back in the business, who is a very efficient person, which I might not be. So great to have her back, and thank God for it. So what is going on? We are having our next event in London on April 11th, and we're having Toby Babb and Carla Rathold speak about the American market and why it's an exciting place to be doing business right now. And we're going to cover a lot of other stuff that we've done. They've both been on the podcast before, so check out the interviews I did with both of them. And I'll probably go through some of their founder journey in person as well. Both great characters, and why I'm mentioning this now is we have probably about 10 tickets left for people who want to come and see it. It doesn't cost anything. Just come, watch how the podcast is done, say hi to us, say hi to the guys. And yeah, it'd be great to meet anybody that's listening in London. I'll send an email out and a LinkedIn post out. But if you're interested, just drop me a line on LinkedIn and we'll get you in there. So today's guest is David Phelan. He is a managing partner at an executive search firm that have been acquired by Morgan McKinley. And he is been in there for a few years now, worked his way up, came from a contingency-based background. So we had a good chat about the differences of contingent-based recruitment and what it's like to work in executive search. It's an area that I don't know a lot about, but I'm fascinated to learn more about it. I'd like to be able to eventually bring my own business into being much more retained once I figure out how to deliver better. So great chat, great guy, and we are excited to get over to Dublin in July so we can catch up with him and all the other recruitment founders that we've had on the podcast, and hopefully we can do a bit of content over there next. And yeah, so that's all that's going on with us. Hope you enjoy the podcast with David. Really appreciate his time for coming on, and I'm excited about the weekend. The sun is shining for the first time in what feels like a long time. So I'm sure you guys are all enjoying it as well. All right, over to David. Take care and happy hunting. David Phelan, how are you?
I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Not too bad at all. I just had a wee cheeky gym session midday, so I'm all pumped and ready to go.
Good. I wish I could say the same, but I've been stuck at a desk and eating bad food, so I can't say I'm being as healthy as you are.
All right. But I hope you're making more money than me then. So
We'll see.
Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. Always love getting an Irishman on board. Are you based in Dublin?
I am based in the city centre. And
I see you studied before getting into recruitment entrepreneurship, eh?
I did for all my sins.
I did a postgrad on that. I don't think I learned anything, if I'm honest.
I always say that my best learning experience for work in general, and I think it stood to me when going into the business we're in, is I worked in a shop for 4 years, just local news agents. And the learning from that in terms of dealing with customers and building relationships and just the day-to-day working of a simple small business like that has probably stood to me more than any of the study I did over the 4 years doing that entrepreneurship degree.
I can relate to that. When I was doing my master's in entrepreneurship, um, I was also having a good time in Brussels. My parents were living there, and I was working in Irish bars and running a nightclub at one stage, and I felt like I was living at night at the time. But a large part of what I was doing, in hindsight now, I was watching how people were interacting, how small businesses were running, and getting to speak to people who are working in all walks of life. And I just always found I was fascinated by what other people were doing for a living. So one thing led to another, and I got into this wonderful industry. How did you manage to get in?
I got in because I was looking for a job and applied for something on Monster or Job Study or something along these kind of lines. And I thought consultant sounds like a grandiose title, and applied for the role. And when I got called about the job, I had to Google what recruitment consultant did. I had absolutely no idea. I just applied for a job. It was back at the beginning of the recession times. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Like, I mean, I was in Australia then in recruitment, and it was easy. It was drinking coffee in the sunshine, meeting your mate's mate, crack like slamming in deals. So that's all it was. But you were in recession Ireland. What was that like as a first professional job? I can imagine it was pretty.
I mean, I suppose I didn't know any different because
Yeah,
I'd kind of come out of college and come into the recruitment business, and of course there were plenty of colleagues around me who had been through some phenomenal times in the years leading up to that, and all of
yeah,
a sudden were crashed down rock bottom. So I suppose you're coming in with the organization probably having a low expectation in terms of what was required. So
yeah.
getting stuck in there, you're kind of just expecting that it's just tough, and that's just the way it is. And it was probably not a bad time to come in because you were coming in where nothing was easy, and you had to fight for everything, and you had to be different and know your market.
Who were you calling?
Who was I calling? I mean, at the time, my focus was on FMCG and kind of consumer goods. So it was all I was doing, sales roles and marketing roles and category management roles. So it was all the big brands, your Kellogg's, your Dr. Oetker, your Diageo, and they still had turnover. So there's still
Yeah, of course he
work
did.
there,
Yeah, people still need their cornflakes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And some people that somebody has to sell it. I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
imagine though it wouldn't have been just you who was calling them. Like if 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 the FMCG market survives in a recession, is everybody not after that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was incredibly competitive. I suppose the stance I took was uh, I come into it from out of an entrepreneurial degree. I was very much of the mindset of being massively energetic and hungry, and suppose I took to it like a bit of a geek for the whole consumer industry. My now wife, we'd be in the supermarket and there'd be me assessing, which brands were getting on which shelves,
Jesus.
and essentially, geez,
She
Nestle must
stayed
have a
with you through
fantastic
that
category
nerdy time in
manager.
your life, did you?
God love her. I don't know how she stuck with me, but
Were you a
yeah, I
contingent
suppose
recruiter at the start?
yes, yeah. So I was contingent recruiter for about 4 years
Yeah. Okay.
at the start. So look, I really enjoyed it, but I was probably one of those. I was what you'd probably call a middle of the road recruiter.
Why was
I
that?
Well, because I probably when you see high billing when you come across high billing recruiters, they don't have the luxury of spending a huge amount of time being massively consultative or really getting out there, networking, getting to know their industry, doing a lot of research, because you just have to move through the volumes to a certain extent. You've got to get the volumes up on the board. You've got to be working on a certain number of roles in order to get a certain amount of placements, etc. from that. And I was probably just too slow, being honest.
Mm.
I probably took too much time procrastinating and trying to fill every job instead of where the high billers were, which was just
Where's the
get the
percentage?
numbers
Where's
out
the
there.
percentage win here? How can you do it?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how my brain works.
Yeah. So that's
Although I don't have the billings to back it up anymore.
How, the top contingent billers, they know where they're going to make the easy, quick fees. They're more into wanting to where they can get them quick and easy rather than get the biggest fees or do the most in-depth role mapping the market. It's just about filling jobs. Of course, filling jobs means doing a good job for your clients, getting repeat work back, and not having to spend a huge amount of time constantly having to BD new clients and spending too long on assignments. So it ended up that being that what required you to be really good as a contingent recruiter was actually the complete opposite to really what was needed on the retained side.
Okay, so you then moved to was your next job in retained recruitment?
Yeah. So then I suppose it was within a contingent business I was in.
What does a research person do in a business like that?
Well, actually, that was where the shift came. I suppose I moved from being a consultant in a contingent side to within the same business moving into a research role focused on retained work in that business. So, research is essentially a chunk of what a contingent recruiter does. So the research element is it's the LinkedIn searching, posting roles up, reaching out to candidates, producing the market maps, and essentially supporting the partners or the consultants in the retained business who are spending more of their time doing the business development, relationship management, and assessing candidates and selecting shortlists and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay, so there's no great degree. Did that not feel like a bit of a step back after doing two years of doing everything? That all of a sudden your reason for being is to feed the more senior person?
Look, I suppose you're peeling back elements of what you did. You're going from 360 to doing 180, and you're peeling it back, but you have to map, rather than contacting the candidates that are maybe, just the best people for the role or just the people or the people on your database. You could be researching and having to get 200, 300 profiles together and then whittling that down to, the best 5 or 6. So there was still a huge journey in that. It was a big learning, but ultimately where I jumped at it was the opportunity to work at a more senior level, to interact with a different level of stakeholder. And I suppose I realized that I had to get into that learning position in order to better understand what it was, because I was probably totally naive. I definitely was totally naive at that stage in my view of what search was. I would have thought at the time, coming from the contingent side, is they just charge differently. They get payments up front, they get to work on really senior stuff. It's all very exciting, and and the money rolls in. So what I had underestimated was the level of process, the level of service, and what a client requires from you.
Talk to me about what that process looks like and how that differs, because I think there's a certain process that the biggest search firms have to, the Oxford Bernsteins and that they have to follow to be considered search in the US. What does that look? What does that look like? How does that differentiate from, like, I don't know, a Michael Page or a Robert Walters, who'd be a high-end contingency?
Yeah, look, our process is probably close to an Odgers Berndsen or a Korn Ferry or any of the big search firms, because I suppose that's an element of just clients expect that as part of the service. I mean, how it differs is in a couple of ways. One is just the level of research input. It's they expect continuous updates of research reports, market maps. You're giving them industry insights. you are essentially, rather than asking them for job specs and to give you insights on what's best for your organization, you're very much solution orientated. It's more focused on where's your business, what's the strategic impact that this individual will have on your business, what are you trying to achieve, what's the current business situation. And then essentially you do a huge amount of researching the market, who are all the individuals, candidates, organizations that are in this space. You're doing a lot of psychometric testing, a lot of screening at our stage before it goes to a client. We do assessments in terms of profiles, etc., on the individuals, and then we bring it down to hopefully kind of 4 or 5 in terms of a shortlist. And at times we'll also interview the candidates with the client.
No, that makes sense. I used to do a bit of that as well. The market mapping piece is interesting to me. Are there any tools that you use that keep track of that? And because now effectively with LinkedIn and that, you could do that quite quickly once you kind of have your, is there software that you use to be able to do that?
Yeah, so there's specialist software. We've obviously moving into the world of GDPR now, so it's even more important to kind of have specialist software to track all of that stuff. So you can do to a certain extent, obviously, in the LinkedIn element of your research. Obviously, a lot of our stuff is at a C-suite level, so the research also, research websites, etc., or forums where leadership are listed there. So you're partially compiling your LinkedIn lists on LinkedIn, but essentially when you move them through a process, you need a system to be able to do that. So we've just recently taken on a new system actually called Cluan, which is a US system, and it's purpose built for executive search. So it means that you're continuously tracking the individuals as they move through a process and how you're assessing them and what assessment stage they're at.
Are you using data or anything to do that?
Yeah. So what this system does is it allows us to actually pump out data, which is what the clients ultimately often will look for. So as we're moving through the process, it depends on what the client's agenda is. They might want, a certain industry mix. They might look for a certain type of diversity agenda that they might have in terms of the search that we're performing. And so they'll look for data and analytics on all of that. So we'll pull all of that to provide that to clients and assess it ourselves to make sure we're hitting the KPIs or the milestones that are set for the search.
Do you think retained search could be done on the junior end as well as the senior end?
It could be, and sometimes we are asked by clients who work with us at the senior end and say, we'd love if you could do the same thing at a more junior level. I mean, one of the challenges with that in terms of reaching out to candidates, specifically if you're reaching out to candidates on LinkedIn, is it's very difficult to get high response rates. Much as the same as it's very high to get high response rate in the contingent world, contacting a lot of candidates, because they're, that kind of mid-management level, let's say, is bombarded these days on LinkedIn. I mean, the amount of contacts and emails they're getting from companies and recruiters, especially if they're an area that's in high demand. So we find that the response rates and the quality and the value add is better at a more senior level.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality of for us is, and we say this to our clients all the time, is retained search is not better than contingent recruitment. It's completely dependent on what's the role, what's your timelines, what do you want from this, and you have to obviously compare the cost as well. So,
what would the cost difference be?
Well, the cost difference, I mean, obviously in terms of a payment schedule, it's very different because the client is essentially, firstly, taking you on an exclusive basis, and secondly, they're retaining you. So they're paying a certain amount up front. They're paying another amount when you have either delivered a shortlist or after 30 days. And then the final amount is on the completion. So
a third, a third, a third.
a third, a third, a third. And
Typically 10% each bump, is it?
Totally depends. So
Yeah.
so it totally depends. Look, like any contingent business, you're going to negotiate with a client based on the volume that they work with you on, or the nature of the search.
Yeah.
For clients looking for something that's in depth, EMEA, with a specific position, we look at it in terms of our research costs and our what's it going to cost us, what's our estimated timeline to get this done. If it's a senior C-suite role, that's total global search, and it's going to take huge amount of effort, and it's going to be a long search and a long process, then obviously our costs are going to go up. So we need to make a commercial call on how we're going to negotiate on that.
I've had a few people on the podcast who are search experts, and
Yeah.
I can see a lot of the successful people moving to search over the next 10 years. More so when people are able to use data and they're able to talent pool properly and become that authority in their niche. And I can see the best people will be retained by their clients, and I can see more and more contingent people making that transition over. One of the things that came across in my conversation with two of the most impressive people I've spoken to was that they are giving 12-month guarantees on their placement for executive search. And they're doing that with the view that they're able to embed themselves in the business a little bit, so that they go there, it's guaranteed that they go there, they get an update, they're part of that person's first year induction and into the business. So they're there almost in a consultative manner, to make that happen, and they're using different tools to do that, but that's allowed them to really get a seat at the table. What do you think about that? The level of guarantee that should be offered.
Again,
like whose responsibility do you see it after a certain point of time?
You've got to balance that one up too in terms of the clients that we're working with. Some clients here, you'll probably, if you know them well enough and you've got an ongoing relationship, you might be more open to a longer term guarantee. I mean, ultimately, we would take a similar view in terms of partnering for the longer term, and we probably spend just as much time having conversations and working with our clients and advising our clients when we're not working on an active search as we do when they give us a piece of work to actively work on. So we're constantly working with them in terms of advising them on their value proposition as an employer, what's happening in the market, how they can improve potential retention of the candidates that they have on board. And a huge element of ensuring, let's say, the longevity of the employees you take on, and ensuring that they're going to be successful over the kind of 3, 6, 12, 24 months in the business is the level of constant contact you keep with the client, with the candidate, but also the work that you do before you hire for the role. So a lot of people in the search business will talk about not necessarily their success in placing roles, because there's a natural requirement or expectation that retained search firm is going to place all roles. It's more so people will talk about the tenure of the individuals that they place in the business, and that they haven't had rate long term and being successful. So look, we take quite a benign view. If a client was to come to us after a long period of time, regardless of what our terms say, and say, look, we need you to help and support us on this, it hasn't worked out for XYZ reasons, we take a longer term view as well, in terms of being a business that they'll continue to use, not just for 1 or 2 years or a number of positions, but 5, 10 years on into the future.
How competitive is the Dublin market in search right now?
It's incredibly competitive.
How many search firms would there be?
There are full retained search firms. There's probably five search firms that I can think of off the top of my head doing full search.
Mm.
There's maybe 10 other kind of individuals, whether it's maybe one or two individuals on their own working in a niche market.
Yeah, and then there's the branded contingent firms to make them look like they're search firms.
Yeah,
and they tend to do 20% of their work as retained, exclusive, and kind of brand themselves as search.
yeah,
And they scrape away at market
yeah.
as well, right?
But there's a place for those businesses too. A business that an organization that wants to engage in that level of process. Let's say a contingent business who often do a fantastic job and retain them or take them on exclusively. That's an incredible market. It's a bigger market, probably most likely longer term than the pure high level search market. But an organization that wants a full search offering, a full search firm, will come to a full search firm, and they generally tend to know what it is. They'll tend to know pretty quickly in your conversation, if it looks and quacks like a duck. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding in terms of your delivery and what you deliver to the clients in terms of your product or your service.
Why is it so hard to find recruiters in the Dublin market right now?
It's hard because there's so much growth, to be totally honest. We're at full employment. The Dublin market has a huge amount of tech companies who have a huge amount of salespeople, and a lot of those salespeople in these tech companies have a background in recruitment, because recruitment naturally is a great proving ground for being autonomous and being driven, being used to KPIs, good relationship management. And tech companies have caught on pretty quickly to the fact that we can come in here, we can get these people who have got a great basis for being salespeople in our market. So the biggest, it seems like the biggest competition to recruitment, contingent recruiters specifically, for talent, is actually the tech companies.
Yeah, and not just internal roles, to be salespeople for them as well,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. Predominantly to be salespeople, take on account executive or account management roles, and obviously what these large organizations can offer, particularly for your young recruiters, is the meals, the kind of casual dress, they'll likely be able to give higher basics, a lot of the kind of bells and whistles that come with it. So it's very difficult for an Irish, your average Irish recruitment agency that might have anything from 10 to 50 people, from a cost perspective, to be able to compete with that.
Yeah, I know. I find it when there's people say to me, like, keep an eye out for anybody who's coming home. And I always say to them, by the time they come home, they're ready for Google or Facebook. They're not ready for you.
Yeah.
Like that. The offering's very hard. There seems to be like a big gap in that talent market, and you think it's because of that specifically, but maybe it's also because Dublin's so expensive, and so people from, like, there's tons of talent in the country, right?
Yeah.
But there seems to be a hesitance to set up regional offices in other locations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, it's well, look, an element of the hesitance for the regional location piece is when you actually are there face to face with your clients in Dublin, and they are telling a recruitment agency who's, let's say, based in down the country, and this company's based in Dublin, and they're saying, look, we want an agency who's based here, who's close to us, who can be here at any moment. Now, us in the recruitment industry are well aware of the fact, and you do it all the time in terms of recruiting overseas, that an agency does not necessarily have to be in Dublin to do a phenomenal job in recruiting for people in Dublin. But there's maybe an element of optics or whatever it is. A lot of clients just feel like they'll go for whoever is closest to them.
Yeah, America's like the opposite. people just like they put up offices in LA and in New York, but that's just to attract the recruiters to go there. You know,
They do, yeah.
they're doing countrywide stuff, but it's a market that fascinates me. But you've got a lot. So you've kind of worked your way into a senior position with a Create now.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Accreate, yeah.
Accreate. What's that experience been like for you? Like coming from like, this is what I love about recruitment, you know, because you were in research for head of research for 2.5 years, and now you're a managing partner. So you got to kind of go right up the food chain within a relatively like short period of time.
Yeah.
What's that like? Like, what's your day to day like now compared to what it was when you started out?
Couldn't be more different, to be honest. No, look, it's been a very steep, it's been a steep trajectory, but it's a steep learning curve, and I suppose even now in the role I'm in now, it continues. You know, the learning never stops, and you know, you're still always finding new ways to improve the business and do things that little bit better and maybe optimize your time. I mean, at the moment, I you know, it's very difficult to say exactly what I do, because on a day-to-day basis, I could be involved in totally different aspects of the business. You know, whether it's, you know, you're sitting down working on your brand, your propositions, what you're actually delivering to your clients, how we can optimize our process, what we're doing in terms of business development, marketing, events. You know, our business is also a part and linked with the Morgan McKinley Group. So there is a, you know, an interaction group in terms of the group's overall strategy, and you know, how we may be able to play a part in that, and be of value to the overall group, and also leverage some value that the overall group might have for us.
Yeah, would they ever say, hey, we've got a recruiter who's not really suited to contingent, do you want to maybe have a look at them? Or is everybody after their own P&L?
Look, to be fair, the culture is pretty good, so everyone is pretty open, and there's none of the leadership team are precious. Let's say, if you know, if there's opportunities for their people, they're totally open, which is a really positive. But look, I guess we're absolutely always open to that. I guess the nature of the beast is that it's probably rarer that you get recruiters on the contingent side that are a really good fit for our business. Some of it comes down to the length of the sales cycle and the length. So, you know, I remember one of the things I used to somewhat enjoy about the contingency side was the little wins. You know, the little wins of, you know, every week getting jobs on, getting great CVs in, you know, getting a placement on a regular basis, etc. The little wins are further and fewer between. You've got to really enjoy just the day-to-day of being deep in an industry, being deep in gathering knowledge on your industry sector, and really being someone that your clients can contact and gain knowledge from on what's happening within the industry. So it's very difficult to make a perfect transition over. It's very difficult, but
can you usually spot the ones that are suitable to it, or
you know, and it might be most likely that initially they might really suit a, you know, a research type role where they really love. They might not be, you know, massively interested in the business development element of things, but they might really enjoy the sourcing and the speaking to candidates and that side of things. So there's an opportunity there. Others might be, they really love getting out and doing the business development, but they're not crazy on the resourcing side. And
is it maybe a transition, like, is like, because it's obviously not the same as internal recruitment, but if somebody maybe feels the burn of the agencies, the contingent side, is search a good option for them?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's an element of there's a huge element of it's the way you work. What's your focus on, where do you want to get to, and how do you interact with your clients. Ultimately, if when we are looking to take people in, my first question, my first judgment is not, is this person a high biller?
So what's your process?
It's what's your process?
Yeah.
How do you engage? Is this someone that I'm going to be comfortable putting in front of? Someone at a C-suite level that they're going to be comfortable being asked difficult, high-level questions. You're looking at someone that ultimately can perform much like you'd expect. Any director.
I was trained exactly like that in Robert Walters. But I think maybe I was quite lucky just in terms of the level of management that I had above me.
Yeah.
I can't speak for all contingent, but that's where I've always been like, what is the actual difference? Is it just the market mapping? Is that the key bit? Are you using any data? Are you like I get the process is a bit more. Is it the level of attention? Like it's hard for me to kind of grasp it because I've kind of only seen it in terms of being in the same building, but not ran the process myself.
Yeah. No. Look, the value, the number one value in search, just like the number one value in any kind of professional services company, a big four firm or a law firm, it's the individuals. And it's the individuals that you have in your business, the knowledge that they have of the clients, of their industry, of the market have. I mean, that's number one. And number two, and ultimately for any client, and it doesn't matter whether it's in contingent or search world, they value most delivery, high level of delivery, and
to certainty.
To a certainty. I mean, we literally will deliver on every single role, and that's not hamming it
Really?
up. That's an expectation of every search firm. You have to. They're paying you up front. You are, they're very much committed to you. They're giving a huge amount of their time, and they tend to give a lot more time to you than they would normally give to a contingent process.
Yeah.
You're engaging with senior stakeholders. You have to deliver, and clients are willing to go retained and pay premium in order to get a true advisor who advises them on. Oftentimes we'll be brought into a conversation before they even decide on what role they're going to hire or how they're going to go about hiring. In the contingent world, I was always just given a spec. Can you search for this role?
A seat at the table, hey?
Yes. Look, we're going in having a conversation saying, what are your challenges? What are you trying to achieve? Here's our advice and recommendations on how you potentially go about that. Here's advice on your competitors, your brand, etc., etc. So it goes to a much deeper and larger level. It's very difficult to put it into a black and white of, we give them this document or we give them this piece of data or we give them XYZ, and that's the major difference. That's an element of it, but the massive value is not a market map. Anyone who puts the funds and the time into it can do a huge amount of research and get a list of names together.
Yeah.
It's who are those names? Why did you choose those names? And what's the value add that you bring to our business before, during, and after we hire?
Yeah. Do you know what? I wish I could deliver like that. It's I run a business that's exactly the opposite, I'm afraid. We get called all the time, all day. Can we retain you to do this? I'm like, look, I can't take a retainer because I can't actually deliver. I might be able to give you one person throughout the year. We have a platform, but we're dealing with recruiters, and it's just impossible. It's just impossible. But
I've talked to a lot of continual recruiters in the Dublin market who have kind of asked that question. I'd love to get into the retain space. I'd love to do executive search. I see there's a big opportunity. Or business owners of contingent recruitment companies in Dublin who are growing and doing quite well, and they've kind of said, look, we're thinking we might go into the retained search space. And as I said to them, and it's not a case of me saying I don't want competition, but it's a fast way. If you're not confident and know exactly what you're going to do to deliver and have the network, it's a really quick way to lose money, because it's really time consuming. You're not getting the quick win. Your sales process just to get a role on could be 2-3 months rather than potentially a phone call. And, there isn't the same volume in the market. And there's a huge pressure to deliver, because if you don't deliver, that word spreads really, really quickly. And you can ultimately fall out of favor quite quickly if you're not delivering. So,
given that, is it almost better to hire a professional from a sector rather than a recruiter?
Yeah, at times I would say, yeah. At least you can always teach a professional. I mean, look, the recruitment process is, in any business, is not, it's often overcomplicated by people. It's not massively complex. It's a process. You stick to the process. You do your A's, B's, C's. You can recruit. The real challenge and the real difficulty for any recruitment business at any level is, do you have someone who's able to develop business, engage with clients, and find who is the best talent for this role? Not just matching keywords and a job spec, but I really understand what the business is actually trying to achieve by hiring this individual. Sure. And that's where you see, often people say, God, how did that person get that job? They see it on LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, it might look like they put someone really bizarre into a role. But what really happened there was, the organization hasn't just married up a job title or an organization they worked in. They've married up someone who maybe has a different type of background, but can ultimately deliver the solution that the organization is looking for with that individual. So someone coming from an industry background may very quickly be able to get to the nub of, what's the solution? What does this company need in order to succeed and do well with this person they want to bring into the business? And the recruitment process, we've got a research team, we've got experienced recruiters. They can manage that side of things, and they can coach around that side of things. That's the easier element to be able to handle.
All right, David. David, we are coming to Dublin, I think sometime in June or July. But I'll give you the details. But I'm gonna be holding a bit of an event for recruitment founders there. Yeah. And I'll get a few speakers. And it'd be great to get you along and meet you in person.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. I look forward to it. Look forward to catching you up with you finally and putting a face to the name.
Yeah, good man. All right, thanks for coming on, and we'll speak again soon. And because I really want to pick your brain on how to do rec to rec and exec search. It's something I've never done.
Absolutely. Look, I can tell you firsthand, there's a good market in it if you can figure out your niche in it. There's a huge market in that. I know from other search businesses that I'm always talking to in Irish market and in the London market, it's a big challenge for them too. So happy to talk to you about that when you're here in June.
Deadly. All right, Dave. Take care.
All the best.
Thank you.
You too. Bye bye.
Massive thank you to David for coming on the podcast. Love getting Irish guests on the podcast. I love hearing about the Dublin market. I should be doing more work there. We have about 20 clients, all the best recruitment firms, and every one of them are asking me for people all the time. And it just hasn't been a focus area. I haven't had enough time or enough structure to the way our business works right now. But luckily, as I mentioned, my wife is back in the business now. We're hiring people. We're going to be able to drive, hopefully, a bit more success towards the Dublin market. And I really want to get more work done there. So if you are in Dublin and you want to have a chat about career opportunities, please do hit me up. And if you're a founder there, hit me up as well, because I want to get over in July and replicate what we did in New York and do a docu-series with the best recruitment firms and really just partner with the up-and-coming founders there and get an insight into what it's like over there. So have a great weekend, guys, and thank you for listening.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.